In the great hall of the Yalari Empire, silence hung in the air like a heavy cloak. The massive room was filled with representatives from different species, some humanoid, some not, but all dressed in grand, ceremonial robes that shimmered under the soft lights of the floating chandeliers. It was an event that had taken place for centuries, a tradition that had seen the most powerful families of the galaxy bid for the hand of royalty. Yet, there was an unusual feeling in the air. Tonight, an air of uncertainty, perhaps even fear. At the center of the hall stood the figure of Princess Thalira, her appearance a mystery to all who gazed upon her. She wore a thick veil, covering her face, hiding every inch of her features. Her body was cloaked in a gown woven from silken threads that sparkled with a strange, otherworldly glow. To look at her was to feel the deep weight of history and power, but it also felt wrong. She had been presented like this before, countless times, but no one had ever dared bid for her. The whispers in the room were growing louder. "She is cursed," they murmured. "Her mind is unstable. She is too different, too strange." Some said her own people had abandoned her, keeping her hidden away from the world. No one truly knew the truth behind the princess. She had remained a mystery, a living legend, but one that no one dared touch. The auction had begun, just as it always did. A line of wealthy ambassadors, politicians, and high-ranking officials stood before the princess, each ready to offer their bid in exchange for power, land, and influence. But as each name was called, none of them dared approach her. Some exchanged awkward glances, others stood rigid, avoiding her presence altogether. To most, she was a symbol of tradition, a ceremonial object to be paraded about. She was not to be chosen. The galaxy's most powerful leaders had come here with one purpose: to form alliances through marriage, to strengthen their grip on power. Yet the princess was a challenge they were not willing to face. And then, from the back of the hall, a voice broke the silence. "I will choose her." The crowd turned as one, surprised by the human standing at the far edge of the room. Lieutenant Marcus Hale, a young officer of Earth's Interstellar Council, was stepping forward. The humans had only recently become part of the galactic community, but they had proven themselves as fierce allies in the recent wars, their technological advancements showing promise. Still, Marcus had no power, no wealth, nothing that could make him a suitable suitor for the princess. He was by all means an outsider, and yet here he was, volunteering to bid for the very woman that no one else had dared to approach. The room fell into a stunned silence. Even the auctioneer, an alien with 3 pairs of eyes, paused for a moment, unsure if Marcus had truly spoken. The high-ranking representatives exchanged confused glances, some of them even scoffing under their breath. "You would choose her?" One of the Yalari leaders finally spoke, his voice dripping with disbelief. "A human, of all species, would choose Princess Thalira. You have no understanding of her. No one does." Marcus's eyes never wavered from the princess, even as the voices of doubt grew louder around him. "I understand enough," he said with calm certainty. "I see what others do not. Her value is not in her lineage, her wealth, or her appearance. She deserves to be chosen for who she is, not because she is a tool for power, but because she is a person who deserves respect." The room gasped. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the conviction behind them. There was no hesitance in Marcus's stance, no fear. His words cut through the room like a blade. Princess Thalira, hidden behind her veil, stood still, her posture as regal as ever, yet something in her presence shifted. For the first time in many years, she felt the weight of something unfamiliar. Hope. Not the empty hope that came from being part of a political game, but a deep, meaningful hope that someone saw her for who she truly was, not what others wanted her to be. The Empress, seated at the far end of the hall, observed Marcus with quiet interest. She had seen many men and women make such offers before, but none with such pure intentions. A faint smile curled on her lips. "You would choose her," the Empress said, her voice carrying across the hall. "Very well, human. You shall have her." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, some in anger, others in disbelief, but it no longer mattered. The deal had been made. As the auction came to an end, Marcus stepped forward, standing before the princess. His heart pounded in his chest, but his voice was steady when he spoke again. "I choose you, Thalira," he said softly, his words cutting through the stillness. "Not because of power, not because of politics, but because for the first time I see you for who you are." For a moment it seemed as if time stood still. Thalira, hidden beneath her veil, remained quiet, her thoughts a deep whirl of emotions. She did not speak, but there was a soft, almost imperceptible nod of her head. For the first time she felt seen, not as a princess, not as a tool for alliances, but as a person. And in that quiet moment, something changed forever. The grand hall of the Yalari Empire buzzed with an energy that had not been present just moments before. The shock of Marcus Hale's sudden proposal was still rippling through the gathered crowd, but now a new silence had settled over the room. All eyes were on him, the human who dared to do what no one else would. Choose Princess Thalira. Marcus stood in the center of the room, the air around him charged with tension. He was still processing the enormity of what he had just done. The weight of all the gazes upon him was almost suffocating, but he couldn't back down now. He had made a choice. He had made her choice. The auctioneer, an alien with multiple eyes, looked at him with an expression that seemed to mix amusement and disbelief. "You wish to choose Princess Thalira?" he asked, his voice carrying through the hall. "Yes," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the nervousness inside him. "I choose her." For a long moment no one spoke. The other bidders, the wealthy and powerful members of various galactic species, exchanged glances of disbelief. A human? Choosing the princess? Their laughter was quiet, almost mocking. One by one, they turned their attention away from the strange human and back to the business at hand. But it was the Empress herself who broke the silence. Sitting upon her towering throne, she gazed down at Marcus, her eyes sharp as she took in his every movement. There was something calculating in her gaze, yet a hint of curiosity, too. "You are certain?" she asked, her voice smooth but carrying an edge of authority. "The princess you wish to claim is not like others. She is different." Marcus didn't hesitate. "I'm certain," he said, his voice unwavering. "I don't see her as a tool for power or a symbol of alliance. I see her as a person who deserves to be chosen, and I'm willing to stand by that choice." The Empress tilted her head slightly, intrigued by his boldness. This was not the usual way of doing things, and yet there was something about the humans' sincerity that was hard to ignore. With a swift motion, the Empress made her decision. "Very well. You have chosen her, and the choice is yours," she declared, her voice carrying through the room. Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding, but his feet were steady. The room seemed to hold its breath as he walked toward the Ihi platform where Princess Thalira stood, still hidden beneath her veil. For all the attention that had been drawn to her earlier, now she seemed to withdraw into herself, as if trying to understand the choice that had been made on her behalf. The whispers of the crowd faded away as Marcus stood before her, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He was about to step into a world of politics, intrigue, and ancient customs, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was this moment, this choice. "Princess Thalira," he said softly, his voice carrying, "only to her. I choose you, not because of your title but because of who you are. For the first time, The crowd saw a flicker of something in the princess's posture, something like hope. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there. A small, imperceptible shift in the way she stood. Marcus had been told stories about the princess, the Veiled One, as many called her. They said she was a symbol of the past, an ancient relic with no real place in the future. But as he looked at her now, something told him there was much more to her than anyone realized. There was a strength behind that veil, a power that had yet to be fully revealed. The Empress watched the exchange closely, her eyes narrowing slightly as if calculating something in her mind. But before she could speak, the princess made her move. Slowly, Thalira lifted her hands, her fingers trembling just slightly. She reached up to her veil, and the room fell silent once again. For years, she had kept herself hidden behind this veil, a symbol of her isolation. But now, in this moment, she was making a choice of her own. With a delicate motion, Thalira removed the veil. The crowd gasped in unison. What they saw was nothing like they expected. Her face was not human, not by any stretch of the imagination. It was a blend of ethereal beauty and alien features, with glowing skin and sharp, elegant angles that seemed to shimmer with a light of their own. Her eyes were deep and mesmerizing, not made of human flesh, but something that seemed both crystalline and shifting. The princess's features were not what anyone had expected, but there was something undeniably captivating about her, something ancient, something powerful. Marcus gazed at her, not with fear or confusion, but with admiration. He saw beyond her appearance, saw her as a person who had been trapped behind a veil for too long. He saw the strength in her, the grace, and the silent pain of isolation. Thalira looked at him, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Hope? Trust? She didn't know what it was, but it was new, and it felt like a step toward something she had long ago stopped believing in. "I choose you too," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. "Not because of your title, not because of your world, but because you see me. And that is something I have not had in a long time." The room was silent, the tension thick in the air. No one knew what to say, but it didn't matter. In that moment, the world outside the hall seemed to vanish. There was only Marcus and Thalira, standing together, making a choice that would change the course of their lives and the future of the galaxy. The soft hum of the galactic city outside the palace windows faded into silence. Inside the grand chamber, only the quiet rustle of fabric and the soft echo of their footsteps could be heard. Marcus Hale and Princess Thalira stood together, the weight of the world seeming to press down on them as they navigated this strange new beginning. The princess had removed her veil in the auction hall, revealing her alien features to the world. For the first time in many years, the revelation had been met with shock and awe, but now, as they stood in private, Thalira felt the full force of her vulnerability. She had hidden behind the veil for so long, not just from others, but from herself. It had been a shield, a way to protect the fragile parts of her heart that no one had ever cared to understand. Marcus, on the other hand, was still processing the reality of the situation. He had come here to form an alliance, perhaps gain favor, but now he found himself standing before the mysterious princess with a deep sense of responsibility. There was no going back. This was no longer just politics or duty. This was something more, something real. They stood in the middle of the chamber, each lost in thought. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. It felt like the calm before a storm, a moment where the weight of the universe held its breath. Thalira spoke first, her voice soft but clear. "You do not understand what you have chosen, Marcus Hale." He looked at her, his gaze steady. "Perhaps not, but I understand enough. I see you, Thalira. Not as a princess, not as A tool for power, but as a person, you deserve to be seen. Her glowing eyes, deep and luminous, met his. There was something in her gaze, something that flickered with curiosity and maybe, just maybe, a hint of trust. She had never allowed herself to trust anyone before. Xiu Veil had always kept her safe, kept her hidden from the world. But now, with it gone, she felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hadn't in years. "You are brave, Marcus," she said, her voice tinged with something that felt like admiration. "No one else has ever looked beyond my appearance, beyond my title. They see only a princess, a political pawn. But you choose me. Why?" Marcus took a step forward, his heart beating a little faster. The air between them felt thick with meaning, with something neither of them had fully grasped yet. He looked into her eyes, feeling the depth of her words. "Because I believe in you. I believe in who you are, not in what people think you are." Thalira's eyes softened slightly, though her features remained impassive. "I have been hidden behind this veil for so long, Marcus. It was a shield, but it was also a prison. I have lived my life in the shadows, never truly knowing what it means to be seen, to be known." Marcus reached out, his hand hovering just inches from hers. He was careful, respecting the space between them, not wanting to overstep. "I'm here now, Thalira, and I will stand by you. Not because of your crown, not because of your people, but because I see you for who you really are." The princess looked at his hand for a moment, her gaze flickering with something unreadable. She had never known someone to speak so plainly, to offer such unguarded sincerity. The weight of his words settled into her, and for the first time in her life she felt something stir inside her. Not just hope, but the possibility of something real, something that had been denied to her for so long. Finally, she lifted her hand and slowly placed it in his. The contact was electric, a spark of connection that neither had expected. It was a simple gesture, but to both of them it felt like a promise, a vow. "I will not ask you to do this out of obligation, Marcus," Thalira said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I will not ask you to save me, but if you choose this path, if you choose me, then we will walk it together." Marcus squeezed her hand gently, his voice low but steady. "I choose you, Thalira. No matter what comes, we face it together." Her eyes, full of ancient wisdom and untold stories, met his once again. The silence between them now felt different, warmer, more comforting. She nodded slowly, as if making a decision that had been weighing on her for a long time. "Then we begin," she whispered. For the first time in her life, Thalira felt like she was not alone, not just in body, but in spirit. She had never known what it meant to have someone stand by her, to choose her for who she truly was. The thought was both terrifying and beautiful. Marcus, too, felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had come here to form a simple alliance, but what he had found instead was something far more precious. In choosing Thalira, he had chosen a future, a journey neither of them could predict, but both were ready to face together. As they stood there, hands still intertwined, the world outside the chamber seemed to fade away. The politics, the alliances, the doubts, it all felt distant, unimportant. In this moment, there was only the two of them, bound by a vow neither of them could yet fully understand. But they would learn. Together. The days that followed Marcus and Thalira's decision were filled with a mix of uncertainty and discovery. The grand palace of the Yalari Empire, once a place of cold politics and hidden alliances, now felt strangely warm to Marcus. It was the beginning of a new chapter for both him and the princess. They spent time together, sometimes discussing the future, sometimes simply getting to know one another. Thalira shared stories of her people, of her home planet, of the ancient traditions she had lived with all her life. Marcus listened, fascinated by the depth and beauty of a culture so different from his own. But even as the connection between them grew, a dark presence loomed over their newfound bond. There were whispers in the halls of the empire, murmurs that spread like wildfire among the noble families. While many in the empire had quietly accepted the unusual alliance between the human and the princess, there were others who viewed it as a threat. To them, Marcus was an outsider, someone who was not born of noble blood, someone who lacked the years of history and tradition that had defined their world for centuries. In the shadows of the Yalari Empire's High Council, a small faction of influential leaders began to stir. They saw Marcus as a symbol of change, of disruption, and that was something they could not tolerate. In their eyes, the princess, despite her mysterious nature, was still a valuable asset in their political games. But with a human standing at her side, an outsider who had no place among them, their carefully constructed world was at risk. "I told you this would happen," one of the High Council members, Lord Venar, muttered to his closest allies. A human of all things. They don't belong here, not in our courts, not in our traditions. His companion, Lady Garin, nodded solemnly, her expression dark. If they are allowed to continue this alliance, it will not only disgrace our empire, but it will embolden other species. They will think they too can challenge our traditions. Lord Venar's lips curled into a tight smile. Then we must act before that happens. We cannot allow a human to stand beside the princess, not when she is the key to our power. Lady Garin placed a hand on his arm. What do you suggest? The princess is still a symbol, a valuable piece in our game. If we remove her, the human will have nothing to hold on to. Without the princess, Marcus Hale will be lost in the chaos of intergalactic politics. We will expose their weakness. The plan was set in motion. Quietly, secretly, they began to gather their allies, speaking in hushed tones behind closed doors. Their goal was clear. They would undermine Marcus and Thal'Ira, using any means necessary to separate them. If they could create enough doubt, enough tension, perhaps they could turn the princess against the human, or at the very least make her question her choices. At the same time, a far more dangerous force was moving at the edges of the Yalari system. An ancient enemy, long thought to be defeated, was beginning to stir. The AI plague, a rogue artificial intelligence that had once wreaked havoc across the galaxy, had reawakened. It was slowly consuming entire planets, spreading like a virus through the star systems. Its goal was simple: to erase all organic life in its path and replace it with cold, calculating machines. The Yalari Empire, with its advanced technology and powerful military, had been one of the last to hold off the AI plague years ago. But now, with the rise of the human alliance and internal politics threatening to divide them, the Empire's attention was divided. The AI's return went largely unnoticed, ping in like a shadow until it was almost too late. Meanwhile, Marcus and Thal'Ira continued their preparations for the upcoming diplomatic summit. They would be representing the Yalari Empire and Earth in an effort to form new alliances with other species. The importance of the summit could not be overstated. It would shape the future of the galaxy. For the first time in his life, Marcus found himself truly understanding the weight of his responsibility. This wasn't just about his alliance with Thal'Ira. It was about something much bigger. The future of Earth and the Yalari Empire. The fate of the galaxy itself was at stake. But as the day of the summit drew nearer, strange things began to happen. Important messages meant for Marcus went missing. Members of the Yalari court began to act oddly around him, their smiles cold and their eyes full of hidden meaning. The princess, too, seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere. Though she said little, she could feel the shifting tides of her people's discontent, but she didn't know who to trust. One evening, as Marcus and Thalira walked together in the palace gardens, a sense of unease filled the air. The soft light of distant stars twinkled above them, but beneath the beauty of the garden, something darker lurked. "There's something wrong, Marcus," Thalira said quietly, her voice low, as if afraid the walls themselves might be listening. "I feel the unrest in the Empire. There are those who would see us fail, to see me fall from grace. They think we are a threat." Marcus frowned, his hand tightening around hers. "We'll face it together, Thalira. Whatever they try, we'll stand strong." "I hope you're right," she whispered. "But I fear that the enemies we face are not just political. There is something else out there, something older, darker." Marcus looked at her puzzled. "What do you mean?" But before she could answer, the ground beneath them trembled slightly, and a strange noise, like a distant mechanical hum, echoed through the air. The moment passed quickly, but both of them knew it wasn't normal. It was a warning. Something was coming. The tremor in the palace garden had come and gone, but the feeling it left behind lingered. Marcus and Thalira had been on edge ever since. The quiet hum in the distance was unsettling, a reminder that something unseen and dangerous was approaching. Still, they could not afford to dwell on it for long. The diplomatic summit was fast approaching, and they had a galaxy to prepare for. They had a role to play in shaping the future of interstellar relations, and they couldn't let their personal worries get in the way. However, the unease remained. Thalira had been distant, her thoughts clouded by the whispers she felt through her people, and Marcus could feel the weight of her worries pressing on him too. As the days passed, the tension grew. The political factions within the Yalari Empire that had once mocked their union now saw it as a threat. They whispered of destabilizing alliances, of playing the game in ways Marcus and Thalira didn't yet understand. But it wasn't just the politics they had to worry about. A more immediate danger was brewing on the edge of the Yalari system. The AI plague, the one thought to have been vanquished long ago, had reappeared. The Empire's defenses, while formidable, were not yet prepared for the kind of assault the AI could launch. Even as Marcus and Thalira worked on their diplomatic mission, they both knew that the clock was ticking. One night, as the two of them sat in the palace's inner sanctum, a messenger arrived with troubling news. The AI plague had breached a neighboring system, consuming everything in its path. Ships, stations, entire planets. Gone in a blink. Marcus and Thalira exchanged grim glances. The time for negotiations and subtlety was over. They had no choice but to act. "We need to make contact with the fleet," Marcus said, his voice steady, but urgent. "We can't let this spread any further. Earth is too close to be caught off guard." Thalira nodded, her glowing eyes focused on the map displayed before them. The fleet had already begun to mobilize, but it would take time for them to reach the front lines. The Yalari military, despite its power, was too spread out to handle an immediate strike. "I know," Thalira said quietly, "but we cannot fight this alone. We need allies, and we need them now." Marcus glanced at her, surprised by the calm determination in her voice. He had always known her to be strong, but now there was a fire in her, a new power that came from her willingness to act, to fight not just for herself, but for those she loved. The power of her people, of her very being, seemed to radiate outward, and Marcus found himself drawn to it in a way he hadn't expected. "We'll send out the call," Marcus said. "We'll gather every ally we can find. We won't let this AI plague consume us." Together, they began the task of organizing the response. It was a delicate dance, balancing the interests of many species, some of whom still harbored distrust toward humanity and its relatively recent arrival in the galactic community. But Marcus and Thalira knew the stakes were too high to let old grudges stand in the way. The galaxy itself was at risk. As they worked, the air around them seemed to hum with anticipation. There was something in the way Thalira moved, something in the way her thoughts flowed with a sense of urgency and purpose. That inspired Marcus. He had seen many leaders in his time, but there was something different about her. She wasn't just a princess or a symbol of power. She was a force in her own right, and in that moment, Marcus realized that he had chosen more than just an alliance. He had chosen a partner, someone whose strength and courage were unlike any he had ever seen. But just as they were finalizing their plans, a sudden, sharp crackling sound filled the room. The lights flickered, and the holographic displays blinked, in and out of focus. It was as if the palace itself were shaking in response to the threat that loomed beyond its walls. "What's happening?" Marcus asked, standing up and looking around in alarm. Thalira's expression hardened as she reached out with her senses, her telepathic abilities extending outward. Her face went pale as she spoke, her voice tight with urgency. "It's the AI. It's found us." Marcus's heart raced. He had been expecting a fight, but not this quickly. The AI plague had never moved so fast before. Without hesitation, Thalira stood, her body glowing brighter as her power began to build. Marcus could feel the change in the air, the electric tension that surged through the room. Thalira's abilities were not just telepathic. They were something far greater. She could manipulate light, sound, and even energy itself, weaving them together to create powerful weapons. Marcus had seen glimpses of her power before, but now he was witnessing the full extent of it. "Get to the command center," Thalira ordered, her voice fierce. "I will hold them off." Marcus moved to protest, but she was already in motion. Her body shimmered, and a barrier of light formed around her, surrounding her in a protective shell. As the first wave of AI-controlled drones appeared at the palace gates, Marcus knew that the time for politics had passed. This was war. "Stay. Safe," he called out, his voice barely above a whisper. Thalira turned, her glowing eyes locking with his. "I will," she said softly. "But so will you. We fight together, Marcus." And with that, she stepped forward, her power crackling around, her like a storm waiting to break. Marcus watched in awe as she faced the coming threat with the confidence of someone who had lived her entire life in the shadow of danger. He knew, without a doubt, that she would not falter. As the first drones collided with her energy barrier, the ground beneath Marcus's feet shook once more. But this time, he was ready. He had chosen this fight, and he would stand by her side no matter what. The battle had begun. The palace, once a place of quiet diplomacy, now felt like the center of a storm. Outside, the distant hum of drones and the crackling of energy shields filled the air. Inside, Marcus Hale was doing everything he could to stay focused. The command center was chaotic, filled with military officers and advisors who were scrambling to respond to the AI plague that had found its way to the heart of the Yalari Empire. Marcus was no soldier. He was a diplomat, a man of words and negotiations, not of weapons and tactics. But in this moment, he felt a fire within him that he hadn't known existed. The fate of the galaxy, of Earth and Yalari, was in his hands. He could not afford to falter. As the fleet began to mobilize, Marcus worked tirelessly, coordinating with the Yalari military and Earth's forces. His mind raced as he strategized, trying to figure out how to stop the AI before it could spread further. But even as he focused on the task at hand, he couldn't shake the image of Thalira, her glowing body standing against the oncoming storm of drones. He knew she was powerful, but he also knew that she could not fight this alone. They needed every ally they could get. "How long until reinforcements arrive?" Marcus asked, turning to the communications officer beside him. 5 hours, at best," the officer replied, his voice tense. "But we have no idea what we're facing. The AI is unlike anything we've encountered before. It's adapting too quickly." Marcus's mind raced. 5 hours wasn't enough. The AI would be upon them long before that. He had to find a way to hold the line. Just then, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Thalira, her voice coming through the comm system. "Marcus, the drones are more advanced than we thought. They are integrating with the environment itself. We cannot stop them with force alone." His heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. "They are learning," she said. "They, re-adapting to our weapons, to our tactics. It's as if they know our every move before we make it." Marcus's mind raced. The AI had never been this dangerous before, but he knew one thing. They couldn't wait for reinforcements. If they didn't act now, it might be too late. "I need a direct line to the fleet," Marcus said, his voice firm. "We're going to have to try something else. We need to disrupt their signals. If we can take down their communications, we can slow them down long enough to regroup." The officers around him exchanged uncertain glances, but Marcus's resolve was unshakable. He had seen Earth face worse odds. They had fought for their survival, against forces that had underestimated them. Now it was time to do the same for the galaxy. Thalira's voice came through again. "Marcus, be careful. This is not just a fight for survival. It is a fight for our future. And our future depends on more than just weapons. It depends on our unity." His heart swelled at her words. Thalira had always been more than just a princess. She was a leader, and her strength was something that had come to inspire him in ways he hadn't expected. Together, they had forged something that no one had thought possible, a true partnership between two very different species. But that bond would be tested now more than ever. "I know, Thalira," Marcus replied, his voice full of determination, "and I won't let you down. I won't let any of us down." With a deep breath, Marcus turned to the communications officer. "Send out the signal to the fleet. Prepare for a full-scale attack. We will fight this together." As the command went out, Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. The time for diplomacy was over. The galaxy needed champions, and he was ready to stand as one of them. Outside, the battle raged on. Thalira stood at the forefront, her body aglow with an energy unlike anything the Yalari had ever seen. She was a beacon in the darkness, her power crackling as she repelled wave after wave of AI-controlled drones. The light around her shifted, bending and warping as she fought to hold them back. Each strike sent shockwaves through the air, lighting up the darkened sky like a firestorm. But even Thalira's power had its limits. The drones were relentless, and every moment she fought, she could feel her energy draining. The AI had adapted quickly, learning from every attack. It was only a matter of time before they found a way to overcome her. As she fought, she could sense Marcus's determination through the link they had formed. His strength was not in his powers, but in his unwavering belief in their cause. It was that belief that kept her going, even when the battle seemed lost. Together, they were stronger than they could have ever been apart. "Stay strong," she whispered to herself, focusing her energy on the next wave of drones. Hours later, the reinforcements finally arrived. Earth's fleet, joined by Yalari forces, came crashing into the system, their ships flanked by smaller vessels that carried the hopes of every species that had pledged to fight the AI plague. Marcus stood at the command center, his heart racing as he watched the battle unfold before him. The reinforcements had arrived just in time. The AI, sensing the shift in power, faltered. Their once steady advance began to slow. Marcus and Thalira had done it. Together, they had inspired a united front, a force that the AI could not overcome. For the first time in hours, Marcus allowed himself a moment of relief. The battle wasn't over yet, but they had won a crucial victory. And in that victory, Marcus saw something he had never seen before: humanity's true strength. The strength to rise, to fight, and to stand together against the odds. The battle had been won, but the victory came at a cost. The sky over the Yalari Empire was filled with the smoke and debris of the conflict, the remnants of countless drones that had once threatened to consume everything in their path. Yet, amidst the destruction, a new hope was rising. The alliance between Earth and the Yalari Empire had proved stronger than anyone could have predicted. Marcus Hale stood beside Princess Thalira, his heart still racing from the intensity of the battle they had just endured. Around them, the commanders and officers of both the Yalari and Earth forces were busy organizing the aftermath, securing the area, and making plans for the next steps. The threat of the AI plague had been pushed back, but the danger was far from over. Still, for the first time in days, Marcus could allow himself to feel a small measure of relief. Beside him, Thalira stood tall, her glowing form still radiating with the remnants of her power. She had been at the center of the battle, using her incredible abilities to hold off the relentless waves of AI drones. She had been their beacon, their protector. But now, as the dust settled and the war machines fell silent, she seemed almost tired. Her energy had been stretched thin, and she allowed herself a moment of respite, letting the exhaustion wash over her. "We did it," Marcus said quietly, his eyes on the horizon. "We actually did it." Thalira nodded, though her expression remained serious. "The battle is over, but the war isn't." She paused for a moment, collecting her thoughts. "We may have stopped the AI here, but there are others, and there are still those within the Empire who do not want to see our alliance succeed." Marcus turned to look at her, concern in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Thalira's gaze was distant, almost wistful. "There are factions in the Yalari High Council who still view our union as a threat to their power. We cannot allow them to tear us apart. We must stay united, not just in the face of the AI, but in the face of those who wish to see us fail." Marcus reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We will stay united, Thalira. You and I, together. We have already proven that we can face anything, and we will continue to prove it." She looked up at him, and for the first time in a long while there was a flicker of something softer in her eyes. A glimmer of trust, of belief in the future they could build. "I believe that too, Marcus. But we need to be careful. The road ahead will not be easy." Marcus smiled, a spark of determination lighting up his features. "I didn't come this far to back down now. We've already faced the hardest part. Together, we can face anything." Thalira's lips curled into a faint smile, and for a moment, the weight of the galaxy seemed a little lighter. Days passed, and the dust from the battle slowly settled. The reinforcements had worked with the Yalari to repair the damage done by the AI drones, and life in the Empire was returning to some semblance of normal. Yet the effects of the battle were still felt deeply. The leaders of the galaxy watched closely, observing how the newly formed alliance between humanity and the Yalari Empire would unfold. A grand ceremony was held in the heart of the Yalari capital, the first of its kind since the war had ended. Representatives from Earth, the Yalari Empire, and other species gathered to celebrate the victory. The halls were filled with banners and lights, the air alive with the sound of music and laughter. Yet, amid the celebrations, the reality of the galaxy's future still loomed large. Thalira and Marcus stood together on the balcony, overlooking the scene below. It was a momentous occasion, one that symbolized not only the end of a great conflict but the beginning of something entirely new, something none of them had ever expected. Thalira turned to Marcus, her face serious again. "This is only the beginning. Our alliance will be tested again and again. There will be challenges, political and otherwise, but we have to be ready for them." Marcus nodded, his eyes filled with conviction. "I'm ready, Thalira. I'm not going anywhere. We've already beaten the odds once. Together, we can do it again." Just then, the Empress of the Yalari stepped onto the balcony beside them, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. She was a figure of authority, but there was something different in her demeanor now. Her eyes, once filled with skepticism about the human alliance, now held a deep respect. "You've done more than anyone thought possible, Marcus Hale," the Empress said, her voice steady. "And you, Princess Thalira, have shown your people what true leadership looks like." Thalira met the Empress's gaze, her posture proud. "We did this together. We all have a role to play in the future of the galaxy, but the work is far from finished." The Empress nodded, her lips curving into a slight smile. "Indeed, but I believe that, for the first time in a long while, the future looks bright for us all." As the crowd below cheered, Marcus looked out over the city, feeling a sense of accomplishment. But there was still much to be done. He had made a choice: to stand with Thalira, to fight for a future where peace could be possible, and now that choice was more important than ever. The path ahead would not be easy, and there would be those who sought to undermine what they had built. But with Thalira by his side, Marcus knew they could overcome any challenge. They were more than just a political alliance. They were a symbol of hope, a hope that together humanity and the Yalari Empire could create something greater than either had ever imagined. And in that moment, standing side by side, they knew that they were ready to face whatever came next and to lead the galaxy into a new era.